All right. Good afternoon, guys. This is the afternoon session here. Hopefully, you're tuning in to Ferko TV here. Hopefully, you had a chance to watch the video with Mr. Canaloo and I on the skeletal system. So that's what we're going to be talking about for today or this afternoon. All right. Oops, looks like I got a couple people in here. If you just want to say hello. All right. And who is this? The Goose the Moose. Help me out with your name here. I can't remember your screen name. Okay, Christian. How you doing, Christian? We got Christian in here. Can't remember who the other name is for the goose. You can just state your name there. Diego, that's right. How you doing, Diego? I did get your work. Diego, so good job. Good afternoon. We'll be talking about the skeletal system and your project for this upcoming week for Friday. So I'm going to kind of wait a couple minutes here, maybe another minute or so, and we'll get started with the skeletal system, and I'll be explaining what to do with your project with that. Okay, so we got Christian, we got Diego. Anybody else in here want to say hello? Got a couple other people in here. Okay. Okay, very good. This is the last thing you need to do today. For that's good. So you'll have the whole week to work on it. There is a brain pop on the skeletal system. It's just under skeleton. Okay, so that's what it's labeled under as a skeleton. So you'll see that if you go into brain pop as well. Make sure you're doing those too, keeping up with the work on the brain pop. Okay. And we'll talk about the skeletal system today. I'm going to give you guys some information about bones itself and the parts of the bones, and then we will discuss some of those towards the end, and I'll talk about your project, which is due Friday, along with the brain pop. So I'll explain that. Did you guys have a chance to watch the video by chance, Diego or Christopher or Christian that are in here? Did you guys have a chance to watch Mr. Canaloo and I's video on the skeletal system? If you did not check it out, go ahead and check it out on YouTube. It's under my Teams page. Okay, you saw it, Christian. All right, Diego, you can check it out right now while you're listening in on it. Just go under the team page, find it under there. You're on my period 4 class or 5. I think you're in my period 4 class. So Mr. Canaloo and I did a video on the skeletal system. You'll see a little dance that we did there as well, showing off our dance skills, which aren't too great. So hopefully get a little humor out of that as well too. Okay, so like I said, you could listen. It's only about a 4-minute video on the skeletal system, so I'll give you an idea about the project there too if you watch that video. Okay. All right, excellent. All right, well, I'm going to start with the skeletal system and start talking about it. Okay, so you can just follow along. All right, parts of the skeletal system. Some parts of the skeletal system, of course, are bones, which we call our skeletons. Okay, all right. Joints, which we'll learn about later on in the segment today. They usually connect bones to bones. Okay. Cartilage, which is this tissue, soft tissue in between bones. Okay, so that's what that is. So they kind of connect in between some of the bones. We'll talk more about that later on in this lesson. And ligaments. Ligaments connect bone to bone. Tendons connect bone to muscles. So we'll talk a little bit about those too. But the skeletal system is divided into 2 sections, and you got to know these if you want to jot these names down on the side. But I'll have this put on the PowerPoint too on your Teams page. The axial skeleton. Okay, the axial skeleton is one section of the skeleton, and the other is called the appendicular skeleton. So you got 2 sections of skeletons there. So the axial skeleton is the skull, spinal column, in the rib cage. Okay, so your skull, your head, your backbone, your spinal column, and the rib cage is considered the axial skeleton. The appendicular skeleton consists of your limbs and your girdle. So your arms, your legs, your pelvic area in the middle, that is going to be under your appendicular section there. Okay, so those are the 2 sections of the skeletal system. So you got to know that appendicular and axial skeleton. Okay, so functions of bones. Let me ask you this here, guys. For those that are in here, who could tell me what might be a function of bones or the skeletal system? What would be a function of bones or the skeletal system? What do you think? What would be considered one? Okay, very good. Looks like Diego put to support the body. Same with Christian. Very good. That is one. Support of the body, protection of organs. So it does protect our organs as well. Okay, especially like our rib cage. It protects our liver and heart and other areas in between there. Okay. Movement was, excuse me, I had to sneeze there. Twice. Okay, excuse me. Sorry about that. Movement would be another one there too. Movement is due to the lack or due to the attached skeletal system as well. So movement, protection, support are some of the main functions of bones in the bodies. Now, another would be considered storage of minerals and fats as well too. So they would store minerals and fats, and blood cell formation is also formed in the bones. So blood cell formation within the bone as well. Okay. Now, um, thank you, Christopher, for blessing me. All right, any questions you may have so far? Yeah, we didn't have bones. Looks like Christian said we would be jelly. Yeah, we would be like jelly. We would just kind of be a blob and fall down because there's nothing holding us up, right? Okay, so the skeleton, the adult human skeleton has 206 bones. That's a lot of bones, right? 206 in our body. So there are two basic types of bone. The first type of bone, actually, when we go back to talking about the bones in the adult body, when you are younger, you have more than 200 pounds, so especially at your age, 11, 12, 13 years old, some of the age ranges you guys are probably in. What happens when you get older, those smaller bones fuse into larger bones. So you'll have less bones as you get older. You have more when you're younger, but they'll start to fuse into longer, more sturdier bones. Okay. But going back to what I was just talking about, two basic types of bones. One is called compact bone. The compact bone is the outer portion of the bone. This is the harder material of the bone, the compact bone. Now, the inner part of the bone is called spongy bone. Spongy bone is small, needle-like pieces of bone, and they have many opening or open spaces between these bones in the spongy bone. So there's the two types of the bone that are kind of important to know note there as well. So compact and spongy bone. Now, there are some classified shapes. Bones are classified by their shapes. They're pretty easy, so we'll just talk about some of them. There's four different types here, so note some of these down as well too. One is long bone. Bones are longer than they are wide. Okay, who could think of a long bone in your body? Who could write in your chat bar there? What would be considered a long bone in your body? So for Diego and Christian, the two that have been responding, or anybody else in here, looks like a couple other people, a few other people in here. What would be considered a long bone? Okay, very good. Diego said leg. Christian, you said spine. That's also a good one there too. But the spine is not really considered by its shape. We'll talk about that spine, which is our vertebral column. That's a little bit different under a different shape. But you are right, Diego. It is a long bone would be considered one of your arms and or your legs. Okay. Now, short bones, they're usually square in shape and they're cube-like. So your wrist, okay, your arm, your wrist, and your ankles would be considered short bone. Okay. The next classification of bone shape would be flat. So flat bones are obviously flat and they're curved. So for example, for that would be your skull or sternum would be considered a flat bone. So your head, skull, sternum, in the middle part of your chest, that is a flat bone there. All right, so they're irregular, odd shapes. Okay, so they're vertebrae. Another one I was talking about was irregular shape. They're odd shapes. That was the one Christian was mentioning with your spine, which would be your vertebrae. They would be considered irregular shape. That and the pelvis. So flat, irregular, short, and long bone are the four classifications of the bones in the body. Okay, very good. Good job. All right, moving on to the next part here. Like I will just give you an example. Long bone. This bone right here is called the humerus, your upper arm bone. Okay. A flat bone would be a bone of your skull. Okay, your skull, or a partial bone of your of the skull, or they call it the cranium. Short bone, like I was talking about, would be example of your wrist. Okay, when it moves back and forth, your wrist would be considered one. And an irregular shaped bone would be one like your pelvis or your spinal column, your backbone. Okay, would be an irregular, just as a review. Okay. All right, excellent. All right, next thing I want to talk about are the types of bone cells. They have certain names. The word osteo means bone, okay, as a Latin name for bone. All right, so you'll hear that word a lot for referring to bone. So osteocytes mean mature bone cells. Osteoblasts are bone forming cells, and osteoclasts are bone destroying cells. So they break down the matrix for remodeling and release of calcium for osteoclasts. So bone remodeling is a process by both osteoplasts and osteoclasts. Okay, and then you probably heard the word osteoporosis before. That's someone who has a bone, weak bones or a bone illness, which we'll talk about some of those illnesses on Wednesday. So the word osteo refers to bone. So osteocytes are mature bone cells, osteoblasts are bone forming cells, and osteoclasts are bone destroying cells. So they all kind of sound similar or alike there. Okay, now next thing I'm going to talk about is something called cartilage. You probably have heard of that as well before too. In embryos, the skeleton is primarily cartilage. It's like the material around your nose. Okay. During development, much of the cartilage is replaced by bone when you're younger. So cartilage remains in isolated areas like your nose. It's actually between parts of your ribs, and actually cartilage is between your joints, like your elbows. There's cartilage there, your knee and kneecap. There's cartilage there as well too. Okay, so you probably have heard of cartilage, which is that the material, that flexible material between the bone. All right, looks like we got Vicente in here. So thanks for checking in, Vicente. If you guys have any other questions, you could write questions as I'm going here. So I'm checking in on that as well too. Okay, so I'm going to talk next about the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. So note some of these things down on the axial skeleton here. Now the axial skeleton, this forms the longitudinal, meaning long parts of your body. Okay, so they're divided into three parts: your skull, which is your head, your cranium, your vertebrae column going down your backbone, and your rib cage. Okay, so this is the longitudinal part of your body. This supports and protects organs of the head, neck, and your trunk, meaning your mid-torso. Okay, so your head, your neck, and your midsection there. So that's called the axial skeleton. Those three areas: skull, vertebral column, rib cage. Note that down. Those are the ones that are part of the axial skeleton. Okay. Now, the next part I'm gonna talk about is called the appendicular skeleton. This includes areas other than the axial skeleton, the skull, the vertebral column, and the rib cage. This includes bones of limbs and bones that anchor them to the axial skeleton. So those are the limbs, meaning your arms, okay, your shoulders, your legs are going to be all included with the appendicular skeleton. So I'm going to kind of go over some of these parts of the appendicular skeleton next. We have something called the pectoral girdle, which is this area around your chest. The clavicle, which is bone right here, like a shoulder bone. Scapula is the back shoulder blade, okay, bone in the back there. And then the upper limbs, like I was talking about, the humerus, your arm bone, and the pelvic girdle, which is kind of like your sacrum and your coccyx, that would be around your hip bone areas, and your lower limbs, meaning your legs, your femur and tibia and fibula, which we'll talk about those ones there too. Okay, so the appendicular skeleton includes all those areas other than the head, you mean your skull, your vertebral column, and your rib cage, but all these other areas, your arms, your legs, your pelvic area, so that's what that's called. Another name for a joint, a scientific name for it, is called articulation. So an articulation is where joints meet and connect and form. So that's where a lot of the joints meet in the appendicular skeleton as well. So that a lot of them are connected into that area. Okay, any questions so far? Looks like we got one here by Diego. Also, cartilage is one of the only tissues that don't heal. Right. You're asking if it doesn't heal. Yeah, cartilage is like that material, so it can be, it supports the bone in place, is what it does. It can heal, but it's the bone itself will heal after like something like a break, but something that cartilage can be taken out. Say if you had a knee injury and somebody was getting a kneecap replaced or something like that, that's important part that needs to be in place there. Okay. All right. And who do we have here? We got another person in here. Is this Gus? Okay. All right. Hi, Gus. Thanks for checking in. So we got Gus, we got Diego, Vicente, and Christian so far. All right. Thanks for checking in. All right. Okay. Now, joints, like I was talking about, are or an articulation is a place where two bones come together. All right. So there's some specific kinds of joints, which I'm going to talk about next. All right. Now, these types of joints, well, the first one I'm going to talk about is an immovable joint. The scientific name for it is a fibrous joint. It's immovable. That means it doesn't move. So it connects bones and there's no movement. So your skull, your head, and your pelvis area would be considered one of them. Okay. All right. So the fibrous joint would be that. Cartilaginous joints are slightly movable, okay, and they're attached by cartilage with little movement, such as your spine and your ribs, okay. So that would be cartilaginous ones. Those are ones in between your ribs. They have slight movement when you turn back and forth. Your rib cage moves, so there's cartilage in between the ribs there. So they're slightly movable. Cartilaginous is the name of that one. So you got fibrous, immovable, cartilaginous, slightly movable, and you have one called synovial, and it's free moving. Okay, much of the movement, much more movement than a cartilaginous joint. So the cavities of the bones are filled with synovial fluid. This helps the lubricate and protection of the bones. So I'm going to talk mainly the next few of these specific type of joints are synovial joints, which are free movable joints. Okay, all right. So let's listen up for a few of these ones here. Okay, well, first synovial one I'm going to talk about is called a hinge joint, okay, where it's kind of like a door hinge, and we'll talk about that. And then there's one called a plane joint and a pivot joint. So these are some types of movable joints. So these are types of joints based on movement. So the first one I was talking about is called a hinge joint, okay. A hinge joint allows an extension or retraction of an appendage. For example, your knee and your arm would be example, your elbow moving back and forth like a door frame, okay, would be considered a hinge joint there. Okay, all right. So that would be considered one, your elbow and your knee. Okay, all right. So the next one here is called a ball and socket joint. A ball and socket joint allows radial movement in almost any direction. So they're found in your hips and your shoulder. So when you throw a baseball or an object, the arm shoulder blades moving in a rotation. Okay. So where you're stretching your shoulder, your arm pointed back behind your body, that would be considered a ball and socket joint. So, and same with your hip. Your hip moves in a ball and socket joint there too when you're walking in your movement. All right, that's there. It's kind of rotating. It's turning like a doorknob in a way. Okay, so they call that ball and socket. All right, that's one, for example, for throwing something like a baseball or whatever, football, any type of sporting item there. Okay, the next type of joint I'm going to talk about is called a gliding joint. And a gliding joint or a plane joint, all right, so they can be called gliding or plane joints. The bones slide past one another. So they slide like your hands and your feet. Okay, so your mid-carpal or mid-tarsal joints are gliding joints. So like your wrists, okay, sliding back and forth, gliding. Your wrist and your ankles, you can do the same thing with your feet and your ankles just like that. That's called a gliding joint. So this is another movable joint. This is a synovial joint that is freely movable. Okay, so you got gliding, you got ball and socket, and you got hinge, like the door, like your elbow and your kneecap. That would be the hinge, like it's like moving like there's like a door hinge. It's on a fixed point. Okay, and the last one I'm going to talk about is called a saddle joint. Okay, in the skeletal system. So this type of joint occurs when the touching of surfaces of two bones have both concave and convex regions with the shapes of two bones complementing one another and allowing a wide range of movement. For example, your thumb moving back and forth would be considered a saddle joint. How it could go back, forth, rounded a little bit, so it moves a lot differently than your other fingers do. Okay, so a saddle joint would be considered one there. Okay, all right. Any other questions so far? I covered some of the basic parts of, the skeletal system and what their functions are, how it's used, and how these parts work. Okay, I'm not going to get into every detail until Wednesday. I'll probably get into some more detail on the actual bone itself and along with some of the diseases with them. But for your project, okay, I'm just going to kind of go over. If you watch the video with Mr. Canaloo and I, we did talk about researching in upper and lower parts of the skeletal system. You don't have to label every part, okay, you're the whole body, but the upper and lower parts, and provide information on upper or lower. So either the upper torso, that's the upper part, like your shoulder all the way up the head, all right, or from your waist pretty much up, and then your waist, different types of bones in each area. Okay, like from the femur, the humerus, the ulna, that kind of stuff. Okay, all right, so that'll be due on Friday. All right, so you'll have the whole week to do that, and along with the brain pop. So you'll have a brain pop that's already scheduled out there right now. Okay, and diagramming and labeling these parts and what they do. Okay, for the skeletal system. Any other questions, comments, concerns so far? Screen froze. Okay, who's that? Gus? Is it back to normal yet? Okay, so do we have any other questions, comments, concerns so far on the skeletal system itself? All right, I'm going to do a little question and answer with you, see how well you've been paying attention on this. Um, so I'm just going to start with some shapes of bones. Bones are classified by their shape. What are their types of shape? There were four of them. Who was paying attention? Write your answer in the chat bar. What are the four types of shapes of bones that were classified? How they're classified? Okay, very good. We got Christian that mentioned long bone as one of them. Very good. That's one. What's another one? Saddle joint? No, saddle joint would be that's joints. We're talking about bones, classification of bones. So good try there, Gus. A saddle joint would be a type of joint. Okay, a movable joint. When we're talking about the classification of bones, I went over earlier. If you missed the first part of the section here, there are four types of joints. I mean, four types of bones, classifying bones. So long would be considered one. All right. What's another one? Flat. Very good. Christian mentioned flat. So we got long, like your arms and your legs would be considered as one. We have flat, which would be considered your skull and your sternum. There are two other kinds next. Good job, Christian. Very good. Short would be another one there too. Short bones. They're usually square in shape, cube-like, and your wrist and your ankles would be considered short. Very good. Short bones. Very good. Okay, and very good. Irregular would be the last one. So those are the odd shapes. So vertebrae, column, and your pelvis, they're irregular shape. Very good. So good job there, you guys. What were the two types of bones? There were two specific types of bones. And can you tell me what they were or maybe what they did? Can you write your answer down on that if you remember? 2 types of bones. So good job, Christian. You've been paying attention here, so nice job. So what would be there's 2 types of bones or bone tissue. What were they called? 2 basic types of bone tissue. Like that was one of the first questions I asked, or first things I went over. Okay, now not cartilage. Cartilage is a part of the bone, but that's not one. It's a good try. I'll try that again. Yes, very good, Christian. Spongy and compact bone. So spongy bone was the outer hard parts of the bone. Very good. That's the compact bone, the outer part, and the inner part is called the spongy bone. Okay, so they're small, needle-like pieces of bone with many openings and open spaces. Very good for the spongy bone. All right. About how many bones are in the adult human body? Do you remember the number I specifically said? How many bones are in the human body? There's a specific number I mentioned. Remember how many bones are in a human body? Very good. Diego got that. Nice job, Diego. 206 human bones in the body. Very good. And I remember telling you, like, when you're younger, you have more bones and they fuse together. Good job, Gus, there, too. All right. If you guys could write next in your chat bar there, can you tell me a function of bones? There was about 5 of them I went over, but it doesn't matter which one. So tell me a function of bones. You mentioned some earlier on, that, and I went over a couple other ones too on top of that. So just write a couple functions of bones in your chat bar there. What's another function of bone? Like, I mean, what it does, why it's important. Okay, well, Christian says support. Very good. That's one. Supports one. What's another function of bone? Okay, movement. Very good. Protection. Good job. These are all good. All right. And yeah, very good. So you can move. So movement, protection, support, those are all good answers, along with blood cell formation and storage of minerals and fats would be some other ones there too. All right, good job answering those. All right. Um, then I talked about cartilage as well, and I said that's the tissue between the bones, okay, during the development. All right, so just make note of what cartilage is there. Oh, the skeleton system itself. I told you it was broken down into 2 specific types of skeletons. All right, what were they? 2 sections of skeletons. What are they called? That's kind of what I was telling you with your project. You could do either one of the upper torso or lower torso, or the 2 types of skeletons that I went over. Remember, there are specific parts under each one. What were they called? Okay, no, not endoskeleton. Remember, I told you there's a couple major, two areas, so they're divided into two sections. I think I'm going to help you give you this answer here. There's the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. So the axial skeleton is your skull, your spinal column, and your rib cage, your upper part. Your appendicular or your limbs and your girdle, meaning your arms, your pelvic area, and they call that the girdle, and your legs. Okay? So axial and appendicular. I'll write those in here so you can see this. Axial and appendicular. All right, so those are the two types of skeletons. You can look those up. Axial and appendicular skeletons and what's included on where. Okay? All right, let me have a couple more questions here for you guys. All right. So the axial skeleton, what are the three parts? I just told you right now. Let's pay it if you were paying attention. What are the three parts of the axial skeleton? They're divided into three parts, and what are these three parts? Okay, the skull, the spine, and the rib cage. Very good. So nice job there, Diego. So skull, spine, and rib cage are the three parts of the axial skeleton. This protects the organs of the head, the neck, and the trunk. Very good. Okay, so the axial skeleton is the head. It's going to be your vertebral column and your rib cage. Okay, all right. The appendicular skeleton, what does that include? Write down in the chat bar. What does the appendicular skeleton include? What are some parts that are included on the appendicular skeleton? Appendicular skeleton, Diego. That's not how many. It's just what are some parts that are included in there. Don't worry about how many. So what are some parts of the appendicular skeleton? Like name some of the bones itself that are included in the appendicular skeleton. Okay, very good. Your arms and your legs, very good. That's correct. Good job. Okay, your arms and legs are part of the appendicular skeleton. We also have the clavicle, okay, like your upper shoulder blade, and then scapula, which is a shoulder blade, and the clavicle, it's like your collarbone right here. Okay, so your arms, like I said, and legs, and also what they call the sacrum and coccyx, that's like your hip bones. Okay, so those are included in the appendicular skeleton. All right, I gave you the word articulation. What did that mean? Does anyone remember the word articulation? Oh, it was a scientific word. What did that mean? What's articulation? I'll put it and spell it out for you there. I wrote it in the chat bar there. You could tell me what articulation means. If not, you could always look it up. So what is articulation? Okay, go ahead, Diego, if you know. What is articulation? What does that word mean? I said it earlier. We're referring to appendicular skeleton because the word articulation helps. I'm giving you a clue. It helps connect some of these bones. So what does that mean? Another name for bones connecting to another bone. What would that be called? Okay, skeleton intact. That's a good try. What the word I was looking for was articulation. Also means joint. Okay, it's a joint where the bones meet. Okay, so articulation is where the bones meet and is called a joint. Okay, so a joint or articulation is a place where two bones come together. Okay, all right. Now I'm going to talk about. I did talk about these earlier. See if you remember how good your memory is of these types of joints, specific types of joints. Okay. All right. Another name for an immovable joint, joints that have no movement, like your skull and your pelvis. What are they called? An immovable joint with no movement. Okay, so I'm putting it in. Okay. Not a saddle joint. That's a good try. That has free motion. That would be a synovial or free motion. So another name for an immovable joint with no movement. What is that called? Another name for an immovable joint. What is that called? Okay, very good. Diego, the fibrous joint. Very good. It's a fibrous joint. So movable joint would be considered a fibrous joint. All right, another type, a slightly movable joint, joints that are attached by cartilage. Remember the tissue between there has little movement. Okay, it's a hard tissue between it. Hard flexible tissue is cartilage. So what is that one? It's slightly movable joint. It's in between cartilage. What is that called? I'll put it up here. Slightly movable joint. Slightly movable joint between cartilage. I'll give you a clue. The word cartilage is in this name of the joint. Okay, I'm not too sure what you typed there. No, that's not it, Diego. Good try. All right, but what I was looking for was cartilaginous joint. I'll write that down. All right, and that's long. It has the word cartilage in it. Yeah, that's type of cartilage. Very good. Hyaline, hyaline cartilage. Very good. So that's the word I was looking for there. Cartilaginous is how you say it. All right, and the last type of joint, it's freely movable. What did I said this word a few times, a freely movable joint. What is that called? Freely movable joint. Okay, very good. Diego got that right. Good try, Gus. You mentioned saddle joint, but I'm getting there. The saddle joint is a type of synovial joint, but synovial joint is the correct name. Okay, synovial joint is a freely movable joint. A saddle joint is a type of freely movable joint. All right, only a couple more left here. This is a type of joint that allows an extension and retraction of an appendage, such as your elbow, like your arm moving back and forth. All right, remember I told you the door has this when we open and close a door. It's kind of named after that. So your kneecap would also bend in that same way too, like your elbow. What kind of joint is that called? So what type of joint that is, this is a movable joint that allows the extension and retraction of an appendage, meaning your arm or your knee, like your elbow and your knee, moving back and forth. Like I said, a door has this as well when you open and close a door. It's kind of named after it. Very good. Christian got it and Diego got it. Very good. And that is a hinge joint. Nice job. Okay. This type of joint, all right, allows radial movement in any direction. And it's found at your hips and your shoulders, especially when you're throwing a baseball. Remember, it's moving around like a doorknob, okay, in there, turning it back and forth, just how that moves. On your shoulder, when you throw a baseball or a football, what kind of joint is that called? This is another movable joint. Okay, I'll repeat that again, Diego. This is a type of joint, okay, that allows for radial movement in almost any direction. All right, this is found in your hips and your shoulder, like when you throw a baseball, all right, in a round motion that it goes. So what is that called? Allows for radial movement in almost any direction. Okay, Viral, you're back here. All right, hi, Viral. I'm going to repeat that one more time. Okay. This allows for radial movement in almost any direction. It's found at your hips and your shoulders. Okay, you're on the right track. It's called a ball and socket joint. Okay, I mentioned that one here. I'll put that in the space bar here. Ball and socket. Okay, all right, know what that is there as well. Okay, this one, the next one I only have a few more. This is a joint that slides past one another. Okay, such as your hands and your feet. Your wrist and your ankles would be like one. All right, so it's moving in this direction. What kind of joint is that called? They slide past one another. What kind of joint is that called? Your hands and feet would be an example for that. Nope, not ligaments. This is a type of joint. Ligaments hold the bones in place. Okay, nope, it's not a saddle. Okay, this one is called a gliding joint. Gliding or sliding joint. Gliding joint for that one. Your hands, your wrists going back and forth like that. That is considered a gliding joint. Okay, all right. The last one I'm going to ask you guys here. All right, this is another type of joint. The last one I'm going to talk about. It's another freely movable joint. It's a synovial joint that move past one another, and this is has a wide range of movement. Okay, so they have two bones that complement one another and allow wide range of movement, and that, like your thumb, would be an example how it's moving back and forth. Okay, in different directions there too. All right, I think you mentioned this one a couple times, some of you guys here. Yes, very good. Saddle joint. That was what Gusta stated there. Saddle joint would be the answer for that one. Good job. Okay. All right. Any other questions that you may have for today? I covered everything on the types of bones here within the skeleton. I'll be back on at 5 o'clock today as well too to go over some of these same things as a review. You don't have to do it twice today, as long as you've checked in once. Okay. I'll be putting the information on Teams on what to do for the project, giving you some of the vocab to label. Make sure you are following and doing the um, the brain pop there too. Okay, so then remember, you're either picking the upper part of your torso or lower part of the torso, or the axial or appendicular skeleton as well too, in some of those parts to label and include what they do. Okay, and drawing it on a diagram. All right. Beryl, looks like, what do we label? I'll be putting that out there sometime this afternoon on what to do there. So it'll be on Check on Microsoft Teams. It'll either be your axial skeleton or your appendicular skeleton. You pick one of those two, or your upper or lower portions of the body, and you're going to be labeling all the bones in that area. Okay. Do we have brain pop today? Yeah, I signed it today, but it's not due till Friday. So remember, when you're doing brain pop, watch the video first, then do the vocabulary. Okay. Don't go right and take the quiz 1, 2, 3 because I can't reset it if you got a bad score. Okay. All right. So make sure you really take your time at that. Okay. You got that, Vero? So what to label, those are I'll put the parts on Microsoft Teams. Those are gonna be the parts, either your upper or lower torsos or your axial or an appendicular skeleton. You get to choose either one. Remember, you're just picking one part of those parts of the body, of the upper or the lower parts, or axial or appendicular, and including the vocabulary on each one of them. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, you can check on out if you don't have any more questions. Have a good afternoon there, Gus. Looks like you're checking out for today. Thank you for checking in and participating in question and answers. Thank you, Vero, for popping back in as well and asking any questions that you may have. All right. Diego, do you have any more questions? Christian, do you have any more questions? On what to do or anything about the skeletal system itself? Okay, I don't know who's this question. I don't know who this is. I don't know who's asking this. So if you want to state who you are, I don't know who you are. Yeah, there is a video. Mr. Canlu and I put a video out today on skeletal system. Oh yeah, Decory, yep. Decory, there's a video on the skeletal system. So go on to the homepage. You're in my homeroom class. Okay, so there's a video on that. You could go back and watch one of these segments here, and I'll be back on at 5 o'clock today as well too, talking about the skeletal system. All the other projects, yeah, you have to go back into the Microsoft Teams page and scroll all the way up through all the posts to find them. Yeah, all the assignments are on there. You just have to scroll through them. You could just scroll by looking at the date, because I put that in a message to you on Microsoft Teams there. The due dates are there, so you could look at them whenever they're dated by when you scroll up, and those dates will help you find where that project might be. Especially some of you if you haven't turned anything in yet. So make sure you're keeping up with the work. That's what I was calling around today too. Okay. Other than that, any other questions that you may have? I'll be back on at 5 o'clock today, this afternoon, so you can tune in with me there. If you have any more questions, I'll be presenting more on the same stuff on the skeletal system, or if any questions that you may have, as I'm going to sign off for today because I have another meeting to get to here. Okay. Yeah, I know the brain pops sometimes don't work there, Decory. I know that you messaged me on that as well. I don't know how to, there's no class code that I know of how to access that. I know, I understand. So try your best. If you can't do it, just do it on without accessing a class code and do it and then send me your scores that way. If you're not able to get under my class and do it that way. Okay. All right. To just if you can, because I didn't have a class code with it, so I know some students had some trouble getting onto the brain pop as well. So if it should go automatically to the page to what you need to do. Okay, well, if you have any more questions, you could always email them to me or send me a message on Microsoft Teams. Okay, all right, I will see you guys at 5 o'clock. If you want to pop back in there, you can come back and say hello or any other questions that you have. All right, guys, have a good afternoon. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.